Hi, I'm Angie Jones. I'm the Senior Director of Developer Relations at Applitudes. Today I want to talk about coding future coders. There's very few things that I enjoy more than coding. Looking at a problem, opening a blank canvas, creating a solution to that problem, and then seeing it execute. The joy. How many fields are there where a large percentage of the professionals also do their jobs as a hobby? Many of us, we work on side projects, we work nights, we work weekends, we work holidays just for fun. It's almost inconceivable that people actually pay us to do this stuff. Remember when you first started? I'm sure a lot of you fondly recall the days of the Commodore 64 and typing your very first hello, only to discover that you needed to learn a new language to tinker with this thing. You learned some basic commands and were able to do a bit of math with it. And if you were really hardcore, you had a subscription to one of the magazines, such as Compute, which provided type-in code for you to try out. While I grew up in the 80s, these are not my memories. I wasn't exposed to these things as a child. I didn't have a Commodore 64. I've never touched an issue of Compute magazine. In fact, this was not something I'd ever heard of. I didn't find my joy of coding until I went off to college. I entered my freshman year very uncertain about what I wanted to do for a living. I chose business as my major because it seemed like a broad enough discipline to be applicable to whatever it is I did end up becoming. My father, he was an accountant. And he'd seen signs of technology becoming this emerging space. So he encouraged me to take a computer course just so that I knew how to use these things. Well, silly me, I enrolled in a C++ programming course. I know. I didn't know what programming was. I'd never heard the phrase C++, but college is all about exploration, right? So at the age of 18, I wrote my very first Hello World. I instantly became hooked. The thrill of crafting the commands to, magically make the computer do as I imagined. The power, right? And after each class, we'd get a homework assignment, and I remember racing to the computer lab to complete mine. I'd save it to a floppy disk, and I'd probably run this about 10 more times before it was actually due in a few days. And this was only because I couldn't get enough of seeing it run. My professor, he recognized the passion that I have for this and how good I seemed to be at it. And he asked me, why wasn't I a computer science major? And I explained to him that I don't know what that is. What is it that a computer scientist does? And this is what they do, he explained. So he encouraged me to change my major to computer science, and I must admit the thought of writing these fun programs for a living sounded really exciting. So finally, I'd found what I was meant to do. I got to wondering, is my story unique? Well, there's only one way to find out. I'm going to take you to my favorite research site, Twitter, to see when others learned how to code. So there was a tweet, and it asked, how old were you when you typed your first line of code? Brenton says that he was 7 years old, and he wrote a really simple ASCII art soccer game in BASIC one afternoon after school, second grade, no big deal. He said that his dad wrote Ninja Turtles game with him when he was much younger. So he started pretty early. Chris says that he was 10 years old, and he even remembers some of the commands here. Shane was 8, and he did logo on an Apple II. Gregory was 7, and he remembered also using BASIC, and he had one of those newspapers with the game instructions. Tom was also 8. He used QBasic, used it to say hello to you before playing a tune on the PC. Pretty cool. Frederick was about 10 years old. He remembers coding infinite alerts in JavaScript, and his dad had to quit the browser. Kevin, he was 10. Brian was 9. He had one of those books in the 80s, and he also remembers the, code along instructions, and he made a cool little shark fighting game. Allie was 19. It was in her first computer science class. Taylor was 20. Christina was 20. Kara was 24. Taught herself on Code Academy. Jen was 22. Carla was 28. And Mick Leanne was 51. That's pretty cool. So this got me to thinking, why was there such an age difference between when the males learned to code versus the females? Obviously, women enjoy coding, so how come they didn't start earlier? Well, let me take you on a quick trip back to the 80s so that we could see what exactly was going on back then.
When it comes to video games, nobody compares to Atari.
I find Intellivision more sophisticated and lifelike.
Gentlemen, move over for my friend Vic. The Commodore VIC-20. Move over. The Commodore VIC-20 does more than your machines. It's a great computer that also plays great games. Like this, and this, and this.
A computer that plays great games?
Under $300?
Exactly.
We didn't know.
Get the Commodore VIC-20 computer.
So what did you notice in that commercial? Well, there wasn't a single woman in there, and it seemed to be aimed at gaming, right? Okay, let's look at another one.
Some people have big plans after school. You know what Elliot's going to do? Jeff, too. Elliot's at work on a book report using Scripted on Radio Shack's Color Computer 3. It hooks up to his TV. And Jeff's at his Radio Shack Color Computer 3 playing the newest football game. But wait, what's Elliot doing playing new Super Pitfall? And Jeff's having a blast with a new math tutor. You never know what you might try with more than 100 programs for fun and learning. Radio Shack's Color Computer 3 comes with everything you see here. Other items each sold separately. Only at Radio Shack.
So there were some girls in that one. We saw them get off the bus before and after Elliot and Jeff. Who knows what they were going to do, but we do know that Jeff and Elliot were going to their computers after school, right? And we even saw one of the boys' sister come over and kind of look over his shoulder to see what he was doing, as if she thought it was cool, but no way she would actually use the computer. Right? Let's watch another.
Using an Apple II is very easy. The only hard part is getting your kid away from it. You see, Apples are the leading computers in schools, so even though you bought it to help you work at home, your kid will want to use it for his own homework. Of course, if all else fails, there's one last thing you can try. Get him an Apple of his own.
So in this one, Dad, he bought the computer for himself, but his son was glued to it, right? The son was using it for schoolwork and for leisure. So it seems that it's for both work and hobby. And the other activities that Dad tried to get his son involved with, they just weren't appealing. Only the computer. That's all he wanted. Don't we see that with a lot of tech bros today where, they kind of expect everyone to live and breathe tech? Let's watch one more.
It's a Radio Shack Merry Christmas.
Oh, I remember that Christmas. Dad gave me my first shortwave radio from Radio Shack. What memories. This Christmas, we got our son's color computer 3 from Radio Shack. It hooks right up to our TV and was on sale for less than $130. The color computer 3 makes learning fun. Jimmy even lets me use it for word processing when he isn't playing computer games. Lucky I still got my shortwave.
So this dad, he took such pride in getting his son this computer for Christmas. And he thought back on how special he felt when his dad got him a gadget when he was a kid, and he wanted to do the same for his son. Now, we saw this not just in commercials, but we saw this same type of thing in print ads as well. There are women here, but only as eye candy, the prize, not interested in the computer, but the man who controls the computer. Cringeworthy, I know. Look at this one, also an ad. So this ad is actually pointing out that you need a computer for family needs. But there's no complete family shown here, right? It's only the boys that are shown in this picture. And in this one, we see a family. The salesman, however, is pretty much focused on selling to that boy. He knows that's who's going to use this computer. Now, also looking at the body language here, looks like dad is in control. Even though the salesman is selling to the boy, dad is going to be the one that makes the decision. Mom is kind of off to the side, just happy that her boy is going to get his toy. And then they no longer implied it. They flat out said it. In this one, it says, what kind of man owns his own computer? Letting it be known that this is definitely something for men and boys. And here's another ad. This one is a wanted ad saying that there's a huge demand now for people not only to buy this, but to program these computers. Well, of course, we need men to do this, right? I highlighted a blurb from this ad that says you don't have to be a college man to get a good job in computer programming. Today, even high school grads are stepping into excellent jobs with big futures. This narrative was even prevalent in pop culture. So movies such as War Games glorified the hacker culture. There was Revenge of the Nerds. I like this movie, right? This one was where the nerds are cooler than the jocks and they're stealing their girls. There were movies like Weird Science where these techies were able to program their dream girl. Now, the power of marketing is not one to be underestimated. And there were some pretty strong messages in the 80s about who computers were for. Here are some of the quotes that I found about the power of marketing. It says, marketers have advertising down to a science. They research and they analyze consumer behavior. And we're conditioned from an early age to pay attention to the messages that marketers present to us. Very smart, creative, crafty people are tweaking your brain to get you to want something or to buy something. And while you might think that you're arriving at a conclusion completely on your own, I promise you, marketing played a role in some way. Marketing is so powerful that it can shape our values and beliefs. And we're often not even aware that it's happening. So, what were some of the subliminal messages that we saw in the marketing in the 80s around computers? Well, we saw that computers are toys for boys, smart boys, geeky boys, definitely boys. So, what were the consequences of this? Well, we just so happened to see a sharp decline in the number of women who were studying computer science right along this same time. NPR did a study to show this dip in the 80s where the other sciences, women were still going, kept going up for them, but computer science specifically had a sharp decline. And we never quite recovered from that. Those who did study CS, they felt out of place. They didn't have as much experience with computers. They didn't have stories to brag about. They didn't live, breathe, and sleep computers. And they didn't feel like they could ever catch up. So who do we blame for this? Do we blame the marketers of the 80s? Do we blame the guys who tinkered as boys? Do we blame the women for not getting involved sooner? No. We blame no one. This isn't about blame. This isn't a guilt trip. No one should feel bad if they were introduced to tech at a young age. That's beautiful. It's wonderful. But we're problem solvers by nature. And clearly we have a problem. One way to fix this is to introduce underrepresented children to tech earlier. So it pains me to think that there could be several others just like me who never heard about tech as a field, who never played or tinkered with computers as kids, who, never had those magazines. And thinking of them missing out on this wonderful, joyous career simply because they'd never heard of it kind of breaks my heart. So I set out to introduce young girls to tech, but I worked a full-time job as well. So I don't necessarily have the time to change the entire industry, at least not by myself. So I began to search for organizations that were already doing this type of work. And I found two, Black Girls Code and Tech Girls. And both of these organizations work to expose girls to hands-on coding projects. So Black Girls Code mission is to train 1 million Black girls how to code by 2040. And this group targets girls to between the ages of 7 and 17. And they put the girls into different classes based on their age. So there may be one for girls under 10, and then another one for girls ages 10 to 12, and then 13 and older. And this program was actually perfect for my schedule because they host an event like once a month or so on a weekend, right? So it'll usually be on a Saturday from maybe 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. But there are a variety of volunteer options available. So if you want to teach a class, which I did sometimes, you take an all-day shift, okay? But there's also an option to be a teacher's assistant where you can sign up for just a morning shift or an afternoon shift. So if I had an entire Saturday to volunteer, I teach. If not, I grab one of the shorter shifts. Also, this is a one-time commitment, right? I don't have to go every Saturday, just whenever I'd like to. If I'm in the mood, if I'm in town, if I have that day open, it's a wonderful way to give back. So this worked really well for me. And then Tech Girls is open to all girls who are in middle school. And research shows that this is right around the time when these girls start to lose interest in things like science and math, right? And based on the small sample of Twitter research that we reviewed, we see that this was a critical age for boys when exploring tech. So tech girls, they also do these periodic events, but there's usually about 3 hours or so, and theirs is typically on a weeknight. So this is also great for my schedule. If I didn't have a weekend to volunteer, then maybe I could do, a Tuesday evening after work or so. We teach the girls all kinds of fun things. For example, in this JavaScript workshop, we go into Chrome DevTools. We'd have the girls make little small programs, right? Starting with things as simple as an alert. If that's your first hello world and you make something pop up, that's pretty cool. And then we move on to variables, and by the end of that session, which again is only a couple of hours, by the end of that session, they have written a full program to maybe calculate the tip on a restaurant bill, and print that out to the console. So JavaScript is the language of the web. So for the girls to grab this skill at such an early age, imagine the doors that are opening for them. In this one, the girls create virtual chat boxes and they program the computer to guess their inputs. AI is a hot space right now. So imagine the seed that we're planting by sparking their interest in this on one random Saturday, We also taught them how to build a game using MIT App Inventor. And what's so great about these types of workshops is that we teach them, the fundamentals, and then we just allow them to explore and do stuff on their own. So they are able to come up with their own game, think it up, and then build it. And you'd be amazed by the creativity of these young girls. So we allowed those who wanted to demonstrate their games at the end of the workshop. And they do this in front of the other students as well as the parents who've come back. And I vividly remember a 7-year-old, and she was playing the game that she built in front of everyone, huge crowd. So she got in front of this. She wasn't nervous or anything. And as someone who has studied and built games myself, I was in awe seeing how she had all of the elements of a perfect game. She had engagement, she had addiction, she had just the right amount of a challenge. And I left there feeling so inspired. This young girl was clearly gifted, and maybe I played some small role in showing her a joyful avenue for her gift. We did another session with the girls with Python and Raspberry Pi, and we called this one the parent detector, which is basically a motion detector which records video when it senses movement in the room. So we had the girls connect the motion detector, write Python code to have the camera record upon sensing movement, and then save the recording to a file. And I remember when the girls came to this workshop. So it was after school, and they were kind of trickling in one by one. And the volunteers helped the first few girls get set up. And then I remember as the next wave of girls trickled in, without prompt, the girls who were already set up went over to assist the new girls and get them set up. And this had a domino effect with each group helping the newcomers. And I also remember that this workshop was a hit. So we had more girls show up than we had Raspberry Pis. And I remember the girls openly inviting others to pair with them. And let me tell you, this was the best pairing sessions I've ever seen. No one played the back. No one, dominated. It was just genuine, natural, mutual learning together. Unfortunately, we don't hear a lot of women in tech describe their work environments in this way. And I think having them experience this as young girls will give them that untainted taste for tech that will hopefully encourage them to stay in the field even when things get a little rough. Now, when I talk about volunteering, I sometimes see a peak of interest on my colleagues' face, or they may even say, wow, that's a great thing that you're doing with the girls. But it doesn't necessarily dawn on them that they can help out too. So I started actively encouraging my male colleagues to volunteer as well. And they actually came. So here's another guy who came, one of my colleagues. And here's some more. And you know what? They had a great time helping the girls. So this is definitely something that, if you're a guy, you don't have to leave this to the few women who are in the space. You can help out too. Same goes for Black Girls Code, right? Even non-Black women weren't sure if they should help with Black Girls Code. But there's only so much that I can do and other Black women can do. So we definitely welcome all the help that we can get. And I invited the women out, some women that I worked with, and look at them, front and center. They had an amazing time and, were able to give back. Now, I set out on this quest to spark the joy of coding in others. But I must admit, I always leave these workshops just so rejuvenated. Sharing my passion with them, seeing them light up and produce their own artifacts returns a new joy to me. So that's my small contribution to the next generation. I hope that you'll also consider sharing your joy of coding with them as well. Thank you so much.